Now let me tell you something, because a lot of people out here still don't understand the kind of moves India is pulling off in the world today. You think this is just about tariffs. You think this is just about discounts. No, no, no. This is about a nation showing the world that it knows its worth, that it knows its power, and that it's ready to sit at the big table without waiting for anyone to give them permission. India didn't beg for a deal, didn't crawl for acceptance, didn't bow down to pressure. India stood tall, demanded its respect, and the world, even the United States, had to look back and say, hold on now, we can't play tough with this one. Because if you try to play hardball with India today, you'll find yourself outplayed, outsmarted, and outmaneuvered. 3 big discounts on U.S. tariffs. That right there ain't just numbers on a page. That's proof of leverage. That's proof that the world has changed. The same country that once got pushed around in negotiations, the same country people used to underestimate, is now the one dictating the terms. And that's why this story is bigger than economics. It's a story of pride, of strategy, of how you carry yourself when the lights are on you. India showed that tariffs, trade wars, and economic bullying don't work on a nation that knows how to build its own road. When you've got the power of self-reliance, when you've got billion strong consumers, when you've got one of the fastest growing economies in the world, the game flips. The player who thought they were holding the cards finds out the whole deck has been reshuffled. And this ain't happening in isolation either. This is happening in a world where alliances are being reshaped. You hear about Russia, India, China acting together. That right there is shaking up the balance of power like never before. Now let me break this down in plain talk. For decades, the world has been used to one playbook. Western powers setting the rules, everybody else following along. But now, India, Russia, and China, that's a triangle nobody can afford to ignore. Each one of those countries has massive resources, massive markets, and massive ambitions. And when they align, even loosely, it sends a message: you don't get to run the world alone anymore. See, people need to understand this. The reason the United States had to bend on tariffs with India wasn't just economics. It was politics, it was strategy, it was survival. Because America knows if they push too hard, India's got options. India doesn't need to sit around waiting for one handout when it can turn east to Russia for energy, look north to China for trade balance, or even build its own path through homegrown industries and regional alliances. That's the beauty of independence. When you don't put all your eggs in one basket, you don't panic when somebody tries to shut a door on you. You just walk through another door. And let me tell you something about these discounts. 3 big cuts on tariff, that's not charity. That's respect being given in numbers. That's acknowledgement that India isn't just a buyer, it's a partner too valuable to push away. When you've got over 1 billion people, you're not knocking on the store's door, you are the store. You are the marketplace everybody wants in on. And America knows if they price themselves out, somebody else will happily fill that spot. You think Russia won't. You think China won't. Shoot, the whole of Asia is ready to move in. That's why these tariff cuts matter so much. They're symbolic of how much leverage India holds today. But let's keep it real. This didn't just fall out of the sky. India earned this through years of economic reforms, through pushing Make in India, through building one of the world's fastest growing middle classes, through standing firm in diplomacy. India played the long game. And now, when it sits across the table from Washington or Moscow or Beijing, it doesn't sit there nervous or desperate. It sits there confident because it knows it's got what the world needs: technology markets, skilled labor, defense cooperation, energy demand, and political influence. And that right there is why the RIC angle is so important. See, a lot of folks think India, Russia, and China can't work together because they got differences. Sure, they got rivalries, they got disputes. But here's the truth: when the bigger picture shows up, when they realize the old Western dominated system isn't built for them, they know they gotta at least act together. That triangle doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to be functional enough to scare the rest of the world into realizing they don't control the whole board anymore. Think about it. Russia brings the energy, the military strength, the raw resources. China brings the manufacturing might, the exports, the infrastructure power. India brings the democracy, the talent pool, the tech sector, and the booming consumer base. Together, that's a trifecta of influence that can challenge any global power. And America knows this. That's why they can't afford to alienate India. Because if India leans too far toward Russia and China, the balance shifts overnight. The U.S. knows it needs India as much as India ever needed them, maybe more. So when you hear 3 discounts on U.S. tariffs, don't think small. Don't think it's just a trade line. That's a warning shot. That's a statement that says, we respect India's role in this game. And you know what makes it so powerful? India didn't have to shout, didn't have to throw tantrums. India just stood firm, played the patience card, and waited for the world to recognize reality. That's strength. That's what happens when you know your value. Because let me tell you, in life and in global politics, the moment you realize you don't need validation, that's when validation chases you. Now, there's another piece to this people need to grasp. These tariff discounts also mean the U.S. is trying to keep India close. They know the world is splitting into new camps. BRIS, SEO, all these groupings where India is at the center. And if India decides to fully commit to those, Western dominance takes a major blow. So what do? They start cutting tariffs, making concessions, offering friendship. That's politics. That's strategy. But it's also proof that India ain't begging. India is being courted. And you know what? This ain't just about governments. This is about the people too. Because when tariffs get cut, it means cheaper access, better trade flow, more opportunities for businesses, more jobs, more exports. It's a chain reaction. Every discount trickles down in some way, and it reinforces the reality that India's economy is too important to block. You can't box it out anymore. You can't put up walls against it. All you can do is try to negotiate, try to stay in the game, because walking away would mean losing access to one of the biggest markets on earth. So let's connect the dots. America cuts tariffs on India. Why? Because they know if they don't, India has Russia waiting with oil, with defense deals, with energy pipelines. They know China's sitting there, fighting its own battle with the U.S., but still a massive trading partner with India. They know if India strengthens its ties with both, then the global chessboard flips overnight. And you can't afford that if you're sitting in Washington. That's why this moment is historic. It shows India is no longer in a position of take it or leave it. India is now in the position of you better come correct or we'll walk. And that's the beauty of this new India. This is not the India of the past, waiting for approval, waiting for aid, waiting for permission. This is a bold India, a confident India, an India that will partner with you, but won't bow down to you. And that's why the Roxy alignment matters too, because it gives India more options, more leverage, more pathways to growth without depending on anyone's approval. That independence, that's the scariest thing to old powers. They built their dominance on everyone needing them. But now, the script is flipped. India doesn't need, it chooses. And when you have the power to choose, you hold the upper hand. So don't just look at this as economics, look at it as a lesson. A lesson that shows how a country, or even a person, gets stronger when it invests in itself. when you stop begging for scraps and start building your own. When you play the long game, you turn every no into a maybe, every maybe into a yes, and every yes into a deal that works in your favor. That's exactly what India has done. And that's why these 3 tariff cuts mean the world, because they're not just discounts, they're receipts of respect. Now, let me break this down, because most folks are looking at the discount numbers, looking at those tariff percentages, and they're missing the bigger picture. Everybody's talking about how much India saved, how much cheaper trade is going to get, how American tariffs just got knocked down, but that's surface level. That's the scoreboard number at halftime. What people don't understand is the game plan behind it, the strategy, the way India is positioning itself, not to play by somebody else's rules anymore, but to start writing its own. And that right there is the real move. Because anybody can win a discount, anybody can negotiate a cut on taxes, but not everybody can take a global system that was built without them in mind and turn it into a stage where they're calling the shots. That's what India is doing. That's the power move. See, when you live your life letting somebody else write the rules, you're always at a disadvantage. You're playing on their field under their conditions by their standards. And that's what happened to so many nations for so long. The global trade system was set up by Western powers after the wars, after the Cold War, and everybody else was expected to follow. But here comes India saying, hold up, we got over 1 billion people, we got one of the fastest growing economies, we got talent, resources, innovation, and a rising middle class bigger than entire countries. You don't set the rules for us anymore. You don't tell us how we trade, who we trade with, or what price we accept. We're going to walk into these rooms with our own playbook. And if you don't like it, we'll take our business somewhere else. That's the energy India is carrying today. And that's why those tariff discounts don't mean what people think they mean. They don't mean America was generous. They mean America recognized that the system only works if India agrees to stay in it. And that's where alliances come in. Because India is smart enough to know that you don't stand strong in today's world by standing alone. No matter how big you are, no matter how much potential you've got, this world is interconnected. Trade routes, energy supply, defense cooperation, technology transfers, none of it exists in isolation. So India said, all right, we'll play with you, but we'll also play with Russia. We'll also play with China. We'll also play with Mauritius. We'll also build ties with Africa, Latin America, Southeast Asia. We're not locking ourselves into one camp anymore. And that is what gives India the power to write its own rules. Because when you've got multiple doors to walk through, nobody can lock you inside. When one partner threatens, you turn to another. When one country raises tariffs, you get discounts elsewhere. When one alliance looks shaky, you strengthen another. That flexibility, that freedom of movement, that's power. Think about RIC, Russia, India, China. People look at that trio and they shake their heads because they think, how can India and China cooperate when they've got border issues? How can India and Russia cooperate when America is pressuring sanctions? How does this make sense? But here's the genius. India doesn't need a perfect alliance. It needs leverage. And Rekshi gives it just that. Russia provides energy and military cooperation. China provides manufacturing and trade clout. India provides technology, democracy, and a market nobody else can match. Put all that together, and suddenly you've got an alternative pole of power in the world. Suddenly you've got an alliance that makes Washington, London, and Brussels realize they can't dictate terms so easily anymore. And India, right at the center of that triangle, is the swing player. It can tilt east or west, lean toward Moscow or lean toward Washington, and that keeps everybody courting it, everybody respecting it, everybody cutting tariffs and making concessions. That's not just discounts. That's writing your own rules. And let's be real, India didn't get here overnight. This didn't happen by accident. For decades, India had to deal with being underestimated. People saw poverty, people saw bureaucracy, people saw a country trying to modernize but weighed down by its past. But while they were laughing, while they were doubting, India was building IT hubs, building satellites, building pharmaceutical industries, building roads, ports, highways, airports, building an economy that can't be ignored anymore. And now when India sits down at the table, it doesn't come with a begging bowl, it comes with options. That's the key word, options. When you've got options, nobody can dictate to you. And India's options come from its alliances. America offers deals because they don't want to lose India. Russia offers energy because they want to keep India close. China offers trade partnerships because they know India's market is the prize. And India sits back, looks at all of them and says, we'll take what works for us and leave what doesn't. That's self-respect in action. You want to know the difference between playing the game and writing the rules. Playing the game means you react. Writing the rules means you set the terms. India isn't just reacting to tariffs anymore. It's not begging, please lower this so we can trade. No, India is saying, if you want access to us, you better make it worth our while. That's the shift. And you only get to do that when you have alliances backing you up. Imagine if India had no ties to Russia, no ties to China, no role in BRICS, no influence in SEO, no friends in Africa or the Middle East. Then when America raises tariffs, India's hands would be tied. But because India cultivated those partnerships, when one door closed, another opened. That's the reason these discounts came down in the first place. The US knew India had options, so the only way to stay in the game was to ban. That's leverage turned into policy. And what makes it even more powerful is that India isn't overplaying its hand. It's not running out there shouting, we're the boss now. No, it's moving steady, quiet, confident. It lets the results speak. It lets the world realize slowly that India isn't dependent anymore. It's interdependent by choice. And that subtle shift is rewriting global politics. Because once you stop being dependent and start being a chooser, you start shaping the environment around you. That's the art of writing your own rules. It's not about tearing down the old system. It's about bending it, reshaping it, molding it until it works in your favor. Now let's talk about the ripple effect. When India writes its own rules, it's not just for itself. Other nations are watching. Countries in Africa, in Southeast Asia, in Latin America. They see India refusing to be boxed in. They see India cutting its own deals, walking its own path, and still getting respect from the US, from Russia, from China. That's inspiring. That tells smaller nations that they too don't have to play submissive forever. They too can build options. They too can leverage alliances. They too can stand up and negotiate from strength. So India's move isn't just personal, it's historical. It changes the psychology of how nations see themselves in the world order. And don't miss this part, alliances aren't just governments shaking hands. They're also businesses, people, culture, education, technology transfers. When India strengthens ties with Russia, it's not just about oil, it's about space programs, defense technology, new trade routes. When India works with China, it's not just about trade, it's about competing in manufacturing, about learning efficiency, about building supply chains. When India deals with America, it's not just about tariffs. It's about Silicon Valley partnerships, about Indian talent driving global innovation, about cultural influence that spreads Bollywood, yoga, cuisine, and philosophy worldwide. These alliances are layered, they're complex, and that complexity is what gives India control. Because the more points of contact you have, the more indispensable you become. And when you're indispensable, you don't follow rules. You write them. So when people point at those tariff cuts, don't get distracted by the numbers. Look at the symbolism. Look at the fact that the U.S., a country that used to dictate trade terms to almost everyone, is now making concessions to keep India happy. That's not weakness, that's recognition. Recognition that India is too central to ignore, too powerful to alienate, too strategic to push away. And the only reason India is in that position is because it played the alliance game brilliantly. It refused to be boxed into one camp, refused to be a pawn, refused to be pressured into choosing sides. Instead, it chose itself. It said, we'll deal with all of you, but on our terms. And that's why I say, the discount ain't the move. The move is India shaping a world where it never again has to take what it's given. It takes what it decides.